So I will just be facilitating the panel and just asking different questions. And I'm Carice. We want this to be an engaging conversation, something that we can grow from, learn from, and then just go from there. So, all right, so let me just start with a word of prayer and then we'll begin. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing us to be able to have this opportunity to talk with one another and just talk about real things. We live in a world that has so many different views of things, but we want to see things from your view and grow. Thank you for your love and grace. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. All right, so just to start off, like I said, the name of this panel is talking about interracial relationships. And the first thing to kind of think about, there is a difference when it comes to thinking about race versus culture. And something I found on the internet says, race is a classification of people according to their physical appearances, geographic ancestry, and heritable characteristics. And culture is a classification of people according to their beliefs, values, includes spirituality, religion, region, language, and livelihoods. Now, just a question for anyone in the panel, when it comes to race and culture, do you think that there's a huge difference, there's overlay, and how important is it? All right, can't hear you, Siku.
Okay. You're muted, Siku. Can you unmute?
Go.
There we go.
We can't hear you. You're muted.
I think they're trying to unmute.
I can click ask to unmute.
You want to say something? Is there?
How about there?
Unmute. There we go.
You got it.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Sorry, it seems we're not host on this, but I was going to say there's an overlap, I think, because a lot of times your geography does impact the way that you do things in a certain people group. The temperature is going to impact the way that you're going to dress, the temperatures in a region. So I think there's an overlap, but they're not the same thing, right? Because you can have a lot of similarities with somebody who would be classified, of a different race. But culturally, there are a lot more similarities between you than somebody who would be classified of the same race, but their culture is way more different from yours. I'll say, for instance, okay, wait, we're being recorded, right? I'm not scared. How real do we get? Okay, so I'll say, for example, for me, I remember as a single person and thinking about, just be real, all right. As a single person thinking about, okay, would I be willing to be in a relationship with somebody of a different, race, culture, ethnicity, what forth? And this is not because I hate these people, but just our cultures are so different. Like, I'm Zimbabwean, and my interaction with Jamaicans, I was like, there is no way under the sun that I could ever marry a Jamaican, because I'll bring this guy home and my parents would be like, what are you thinking? I mean, the moment he walked in the house, just because the cultures are just so different, whereas, I married an Asian man, and, well, what are you, Asian? Like, I mean,
Pacific Islands,
yeah,
Southeast Asian.
Yeah,
Southeast Asian.
I married
the Pacific Islands.
I married the kind of Asian who's like confused about whether they're Asian or not. But culturally, there are actually way more similarities, between a Zimbabwean and a Filipino than there are between a Zimbabwean and a Jamaican. From my interactions with them. So even though racially, you would think that, a Zimbabwean and a Jamaican, would be a better match, quote unquote, but it turns out that culturally, it's easier to, relate to like a Filipino. It would be easier for my parents to stomach, a Filipino. Okay, so.
Well, thank you for being real and just sharing like how that even impacts the way we can even approach life and thinking about, okay, maybe one culture or race can be different, but the cultures can collide even easier than some other cultures. I don't know if you had something to say, Callie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had that similar experience where there are certain African cultures that my parents would not be
Okay with.
were not okay with me or the family being with. But if I go all the way to America and find a white lady who's from Maryland, that's totally fine. And even within Kenya, like there's certain tribes that there's just, I mean, it's also like there's a bit of cultural prejudice there as well. Not a lot of cultural prejudice. But the fact that the cultures, sometimes the vast difference in culture makes it more palatable because you're not necessarily competing. But if you see like two different tribes within Kenya, when they marry, because they know each other so intimately and there's been this history, there tends to be more tension. That's just what I've seen with intertribal relationships in Kenya. Whereas like with this, it's just like, we don't know much about American culture. So it's all like, whatever. Is that how you do things? Okay. So yeah, so the race culture, they're just differences that apply.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about sometimes when there's such opposite ones that they don't mesh as well. I mean, they don't mesh as much versus if it's similar, it's like, no, you guys been doing it wrong. Like we are like close to each other, but no. Anyways, all right. So a next question I have for you guys, since you guys are already kind of moving in that direction, for your families, I know you were mentioning how maybe they weren't as comfortable with certain cultures. Now, how did that affect the way you even thought about who you should even date or possibly even be friends with? And did that affect even things within the church?
Ooh, within the church. Well, growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, I spent most of my time with Filipinos, of course, because I'm Filipino. And then most of my friends were Filipino. So I'm like, yeah, I think I want to marry a Filipino. And even the church I went to, a big group of the people were Filipino. So I was always surrounded by Filipinos. And then when I went to Andrews, I met Siku, and she's amazing. And then when and then all of a sudden, like all these Black girls just started being more beautiful to me. I was like, whoa, this is awesome.
Okay, family.
Oh, but yeah, my family, yeah, most of my cousins married Filipinos, but that's the cool thing about growing up in a melting pot, is that so now we have Mexicans in our family, white people, and even I think it's a surprise for like even when you're a friend. Can I tell them? I'm gonna tell the story. Yeah, well, where Siku's parents were with us, and my cousin was coming to to visit, and I I didn't tell them that her husband is Black, and so when they walked in, they were just like, "Whoa, like, they accept us." But it's cool that we can bring each other's differences into our lives, and that's what we really need to do, is meet people different than us so we can understand each other. And that's where we're gonna cross that gap in the church, is by meeting people different than us so we can learn from each other.
Growing up, I had people in my family tell me, you can date anyone you want, just don't date a Black guy, like explicitly. But I mean, that obviously didn't work out. But yeah, like, and they never really gave reasons. And I didn't I was still young, so I'm not going to give like a lot of pushback. And they never gave a reason either. They're just like, don't do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, all right, moving on, whatever that conversation was. Yeah. And I think, you know, reading into it, I think a lot of it is racism fueled by ignorance of like they didn't interact with anyone besides people who looked like them. So they're like, well, they're all bad. Or I'm like subscribing to these like stereotypes I've seen on certain news sites or certain movies or TV shows are like, oh yeah, like all Black people are this way. So Callie, I should not date them. And I'm like, and again, I was like, you know, like 14 when I got that advice for the first time. So, and I also grew up in a very, I mean, there were some people of different races in my schools, but it was predominantly white. So even my interactions, like my interactions, even just friendship wise, didn't start to diversify until after I left high school. And so yeah, in those interactions, I had to learn it myself. And then when I finally did come home with David, no one really gave him, I don't think, was anyone mean to you? No, okay. But before they met him, just when I talked to them and I tell them like, oh, I met this guy, like, oh, where's he from? Like, well, he's in Michigan. He's from Kenya. And they'd be like, what? He's where? And I'm like, he's from Kenya. And then there's lots of racist things people will ask me, which I won't go into now because it makes me angry. But if we want to go there later, we can. But like a lot of it was people, they were like, well, I've had this experience. I don't want you to have this experience. Or they were like, you know, marriage is hard enough as it is. And so to mix in such different cultures, like even one of my family members, like, I literally do not care what he looks like. I don't care about the color of his skin. I'm just saying like marriage is hard already. So to bring in a completely separate culture, I just want you to know that that's what you're in for. And I was like, I understand. Thank you for your advice. I'm going to do it anyways. So yeah, that's what happened.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, just Kelly made me think of something like with who people are comfortable with their children marrying. It a lot of times translates into who they will interact with, because they're like, if my kids are kicking it with, you know, if you don't want your children to marry an Asian, you don't want them to be hanging out with Asians, you know, because then the chances are higher that they're going to marry an Asian. And so I think a lot of times, like the segregation that we see in our churches, like having a Filipino church or having a Korean church, okay, I just picked on the Asians, or having a Kenyan church, I'm gonna go there, a Zimbabwean church, is because, you know, because parents want their children to marry, you know, a Kenyan or marry a Zimbabwean because they're Kenyan, they're Zimbabwean. And so we actually end up segregating ourselves, you know, in our worship based on this very question. It's the reason why, wasn't you were telling, I don't know if I can say this. Okay, I don't have this on legal, on official authority, but apparently even educational institutions have fallen apart because parents didn't want their kids to go to a certain school because now there were too many Black kids going to that school and they don't want their kid to marry a Black kid. And so Adventist institutions will completely fail because of this issue of, I don't want my child to marry outside of their race, etc.
It's called white flight.
It's called white flight, he said.
Now, are you going to say something, David?
Yeah. It's even like, and then you also realize that sometimes they'll be open to another race, but as long as that person of a different race has assimilated to their culture. So it's the same way in our churches as well. It's like we have multi-ethnic churches, but there's a monoculture in that church.
You must act like this.
So it's multi-ethnic and like, oh, we have people of all races, but it's a monoculture church, right? Like we only do things in the European Western way. So it's like, oh, what I mean by I don't want a Black person is I don't want that kind of Black person, or I don't want that kind of white person. But if they're like this, then that's not what I meant, right? And so, so again, yeah. So like racial integration is not cultural integration necessarily, and yeah, I mean, I grew up in a lot of a few countries, and I attended international schools, so I was raised with people from a lot of different countries, and my teachers were mostly white. And so it was interesting when my parents asked me when I started dating Callie. I first told them, yeah, I'm talking to this girl, and they're like, "Oh, you're talking to this girl, huh? So is she Kenyan?" And I was like, "No." Oh, she's white. And I'm like, "Yeah," and they were shocked, and I was like, "Why? Like,
Why are
you
you
can't be
shocked?
shocked because I have been raised with people of all nations throughout my whole life. So like, what do you expect, right? Like, what do you expect? So, like, so that's why it seems, it makes sense that someone would then try to raise someone in a monoculture, so they want monocultural stuff. So, but yeah, so my experience was a little bit different in that sense.
And just to comment on I think it's a reality, but it's a sad reality, really, because we fail to benefit from what I believe that God gave us, all these different cultures. Like, God is the author of diversity. He's the one who painted the rainbow in the sky. He's the one who made flowers different colors, different smells. Like, he loves diversity. He loves the differences, and the differences bring things to the table, and we miss something when we box ourselves in. So I don't think, I know this was a question for later, but because it comes up in this context, I don't think everyone has to marry interracially or, interculturally or whatever. But being closed to that idea limits us from what God can bring to the table, from the experiences that we could have. And like we're saying with this thing, like, it ends up limiting even our social interactions right now. I will not hang out with certain people because I don't want ultimately my kids to, and I feel like God must be sitting up in heaven just like, oh, yeah. So anyways, it's a reality, but a sad one.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that point, Siku. And it just makes me think of the question, like, so how do we even solve, not exactly solve, but how can we help that situation where we're more open to diversity, that we're not so closed-minded and thinking, okay, I have to only be with this type of person. So how can we open it up so that maybe God has something different for us?
So definitely, just know where you are in life. Yeah. Or whatever stage you are in life, know that you are biased against other races and other cultures. Just understand that it's kind of like you look at yourself as a Christian and like, oh, those people are conservative and those people are liberal, because you are your own standard where Jesus is the standard, right? So know that you are biased, and that then you have to open your mind to like, okay, now that I understand, I have a bias. Now I have to unlearn that and educate myself. And again, that goes back to meeting other people that are different than you, and understanding. And I think that's something that attracted me to Siku, was like, man, she's different, and I love learning about her culture. And it was really cool to go to Zimbabwe and see these traditions that were practiced for thousands of years that they're still doing. It was really cool. It was really cool.
Yeah, I think in line with the biases, and I think we mentioned in our previous presentation that cultural differences are fine, but cultural harmony is key. It's knowing that your culture is not better, it's just different.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we have been raised to be like, like, if you marry someone with that culture, it means that your culture will be erased, or they're gonna somehow hijack your culture and they won't appreciate it, and you'll assimilate to theirs and ours is better. And everyone's trying to preserve their own culture. But yeah, it's not looking at one or better or worse than the other. And I think along with the biases is trying to understand, especially if you come from, because like when when we were dating, a lot of aspects of the Kenyan culture seem to be very dominant. So like there's a certain way we do things. I don't know, give examples.
The timeline of getting married.
Yeah, like the timeline of
Or
getting married.
I'm David's friend.
Yeah, until
David's
we're engaged.
Until we're engaged.
Yeah, we're
I'm
not
his
girlfriend or
friend.
boyfriend. Like this is, you know, they introduce her that this is
Oh yeah,
Kylie,
this is
David's friend.
Kylie, Davina and David's friend. I'm
Yeah.
like, bro, we've been dating for 2 years.
Yeah, so things like that, right? And it's supposed, yes, but then you realize that just because my culture is more dominant, it doesn't mean that she doesn't have a culture.
Yeah.
So sometimes we have biases because we don't realize what our cultural values are.
Mhm.
Like, what is your cultural value? So for example, she could have interpreted that as like, you know, like these guys hate me. Like, why are they calling me David's friend? They don't like me. They not include me.
It did make
But
me
it's
cry.
yeah, but like it's not that. It's just the culture is different.
Yeah.
It's not that it's a morally bad thing what they're doing. It's just different.
Like what was helpful to know was David would
Yeah.
say like, babe, even if you were Kisi Kenyan, they would treat you this way.
Yeah.
Like it's not because it's you. It's just, and so
Yeah.
that was really comforting. Cause I'm like, is it just because I don't match? Like, is that
Mhm.
why? And David's like, no.
Yeah.
It's just how it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, not saying that. Of course, there's some morally bad things in culture, but
there is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In every culture.
I think also going into a little bit more on the bias part is it's possible to not be like holistically against something and still be biased. So like, obviously, right, I was dating David and I'm like, yeah, Kenyan culture is awesome, da, da, da. But sometimes he'd say stuff like, this is super innocuous, but I remember it clearly. Do you remember the serving spoon thing?
Oh yeah.
So when we cook, to me, a tablespoon it's a tablespoon, not the one that you eat with. It's a measuring tablespoon. That's what a tablespoon is. Okay, that's what it is. To David, a tablespoon is like a tablespoon they use on the table, like you eat it, like you use it.
Yeah, the big one. The big one.
The big one.
Yeah.
So when I'd be like, yeah, like I need a tablespoon, David would hand me like a spoon you drink soup with. And I'm like, no, like I need like a tablespoon. And he's like, this is a tablespoon. And I'm like, it's not.
Yeah.
This is not the measuring tablespoon. And so in my head, though, again, I respect David. I love him, but I was like, this is so dumb. Like, and I just think like, obviously I'm right and he's wrong because my culture is better than him. Like better than his, like mine is more educated. Mine is better. And I was just like, what the heck? Why do I think that? Like, that wasn't like, what was that in my head? And so, okay, anyways, now I just don't measure. I just don't use any of them.
Right.
But my point is like, again, you can like, I respected David and I loved him, but I still had that thought. And what I could do is get defensive, right? And be like, I'm not thinking that way. Like, I'm actually super unbiased and I have really good, holistic, beautiful thoughts. And I never have anything to grow in. Like, you can get defensive about your own biases and then you don't grow. And so in that situation, I had the opportunity to just be like, man, this is awful. This is in my head. I don't know how it got there, but I'd like for it to leave now. And so just learning, like sometimes when I see differences, like you think you're better because like American culture has taught you this is the best culture and every other culture is not as good as you, but that is a false narrative. And so I need to be aware of that instead of embracing it. So yeah. Also, yeah, I don't know what's it called to not measure. I just don't measure anymore. I'm not a measurer. David measures now and he can use whatever tablespoon he wants.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for just even breaking it down, like from beginning to thinking about what are our biases and just approaching it, realizing we may have some. And even I love what Callie brought up, like even as Americans, we have been taught we are the best country. We have everything right. So if you don't do it this way, something's wrong with you. So realizing in so many levels, we can have these prejudice, biases, stereotypes that can box us in and can cause friction or don't even allow us to love people for who they are and realize there's nothing wrong with how they do different things. So just to back it up a little bit, I would love to hear you guys' love story. So
take it away, Archie, take it away.
All right, so Archie and Siku, can you guys just give us what is your love story? And then we'll just go on from there.
Okay. Let me speak, please.
Speak, husband.
Thank you. So a bunch of my friends were in seminary at Andrews, and they're like, "Yo, bro, come out to Andrews." I'm like, but Southern is so nice. I'm like, "No, man, they're all young." I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're right."
You want to go to PUC?
Oh yeah, PUC too.
Notice how I know the story better. Okay.
And so my friend Justin Trojan like, "Yo, man, it's your first weekend. Let's go to a prayer meeting." I'm like, "Cool." And we go to a prayer meeting, and we come in, and everyone's praying, and I just kneel down. And Siku told me this later. At that prayer meeting, at that moment, she's like, "Dear God, I'm open to dating. You can send me someone now." And then someone said amen, and she opened her eyes, and I was there. And then and then we started a friendship, and and I was like, "Man, this girl is amazing." And we would go on outreach.
Are you going to include the previous part?
Hey, and then I'm like, "All right, God, if you want this to happen, then you're gonna have to pair me up as our outreach partner." And I purposely went
You
to the
did not.
yes, I did. I did went to the other side of the room, and the pastor was like, you, and Sequin Archie, and outside I was like, cool. And in my head, I was like, yeah. And then like, yeah, we just got to know each other going on outreach, and oh man, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna shoot my shot. And then I asked her out for like 7 days straight, and she turned me down every day. But one time she did say, "I have to wash my hair." I'm like, "You have to wash your hair?" But now that I have long hair, I'm like, yeah, dudes, that's the thing, guys. She ain't trying to blow you off. Like, you gotta schedule that, or you.
And if she's a Black woman, you know it's a real thing.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. Yeah, for real. And then I, I'm a co-porter though, bro. I keep knocking, and then finally she like opened up the door, and then we had a really good first date, and it just
So the part that he missed.
Wait. Okay, go.
Yeah. So the part that he missed was that, like, so it was GYC what year?
2013, 2013, Seattle.
GYC Seattle. I was on stage interpreting for somebody from French to English, and like, so find out later, like, he saw me on stage and he was like, "Who's that girl?"
No, I was like, where is that accent from? Because I like accents, man. I like what you do. I like the accents.
We get it.
And then like,
so he was like,
and I like the accent, like the Irish accent. It's a really tough, but the Scottish is deep.
He loves accents.
Yeah, so I'm like, where is this accent? It's like English, but it's not.
Yeah, so he was like, "Who's that woman?" And then he followed me to Andrews.
I did not follow her to Andrews.
And then like he would show up, like, so we had this like little group of friends that we would go knocking on doors on Sabbath afternoons, and like he would just like show up, and everywhere I was, like, he would just like,
we had the same circle of friends.
So he made friends with like all my friends, so that he would always show up wherever I was. I'm like, this dude keeps showing up. Anyways, I love him. That's our story.
Thank you. I just love the variety of the story, and it's a little differences, but I what I'm getting is persistence and being open is the key. Persistent to a certain point. All right, now we need boundaries. All right, now I would love to hear David and Callie.
Yeah, ours was
Go ahead, honey.
probably a little less dramatic. But yeah, we met at our student church in Michigan. So Callie, I was a sophomore in college, and Callie came to preach because she's a preacher. And she came, and the moment I saw her, it was love at first sight.
Absolutely not true at all.
Yeah,
No truth in
nothing.
that.
But anyway, yeah, that's the first time we met, and that was it. And then we didn't see each other for another year
Yeah.
or 2 years. And then but that's how we like first got into contact. We were Facebook friends, I think.
Yeah.
And then actually people thought I was into your best friend.
They did.
Yeah.
I even
was
thought I was
talking to
like,
her.
I saw you talking to that David guy. She was
Yeah.
like, no.
Yeah, people thought we were anyway.
It was
So-
Emily, by the way. Secret, you know.
Yeah. And then a year late, I think a year later, I went to China to volunteer in the leper colonies. And Callie was in charge of a ministry called R3.
Yeah.
And she was in charge of organizing mission trips across the world. And so she wanted her group to go to China. And so she called me to talk about China and see if it was worth going. But then we didn't talk about China.
What did we talk
We
about?
just talked about each other and our lives.
You asked me about the missionary thing I did at campus.
Yeah. So she did a year of campus ministry. And then I wanted to do a year of campus ministry. And so we talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
And
2
then
hours.
for 2 hours.
We did not talk about China.
Yeah.
There was no China.
Yep. And then, but then that was it.
Yeah, that's it. I was just like, he was nice to talk to.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway.
Yeah, I was like, oh, it was nice for him to talk to. And then we didn't talk for like another half a year. And then we came to visit you. So in 2015, our missionary group went to visit DC, and Callie lived in DC. And we started texting on the side privately because during missionary year, you're not supposed to date anyone.
That's true.
I think Sika, I don't know if you were in charge of that.
I mean,
yeah,
she knows we're married now. She knows.
Yeah. Anyway, so we just text on the side, and we basically just got to know each other, and we're friends for a long time.
Yeah, we just became friends, and then really good friends, and then best friends. And then I was like, I like this guy way too much just to be friends.
Yeah.
Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then he told me they liked me, and I was like, yeah, I like you too. Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, it's not. It
there-
wasn't like this.
I feel like there was more drama during the dating phase rather than
There was more drama during the dating.
Yeah.
phase. Yeah.
No.
The getting to dating was just. So I was convinced David didn't like me because I was like, he's just too good for me. And my best friend was like, no, I'm pretty sure he likes you. Like, da-da-da. Versus David's like, yeah, I don't know if Callie likes me. And his best friend was like, dude, Callie Williams, there's no way she likes you. Absolutely
Yeah.
not.
So you're dating the Callie Williams?
It was Shoma.
Even Justin Kim was like, dude, man, you're
He's
marrying up, bro. You're
Yeah, he's
marrying
like,
up.
dude, Callie, I don't
Like,
know about that.
yeah,
I'm like, you
man.
guys, what?
I'm like, dude,
They're just
oh,
being,
y'all
they're
just
just being
like,
protective.
come on, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we
Yeah.
started dating at the end of 2015, and now we're here.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I've also seen a pattern with the both of your couples: ministry, prayer meeting, friends. So those are all different hints for those who are still in the dating pool, and also Andrews. Apparently, that's where we all need to go. But anyway, all right. So there was a question that came in, and the question is, what was the initial reaction from your family, including extended family, when you guys started dating? And then you can even go to when you thought about getting married. And I know you guys kind of touched on it, but you can say some more. So I will ask David and Callie first. Okay.
Okay. You want to go first? You want me to go
You
first?
can go
Okay.
Mm.
So I told people about David before they met him. So, because we're also long distance. So, I have 3 brothers and no sisters. My 3 brothers were just like, okay, like they just unbothered, don't care. My parents were a variation of like, okay, like we just haven't met him. And then there was, again, the concern of just like the different culture. Like, are you sure? But once they met him, they were just like, we love him so much. I'm like, I know, me too. So thankfully, we met my family. Everything was really, really good. From extended family, again, everyone was super nice to David, to his face. They just ask really offensive questions. And like David thinks it's funny. David's like, whatever, they're just ignorant. It makes me want to be violent. Like, it makes me very angry. So some of the questions I got were, does he speak English? Will he let you work outside the home? Does he hit you? Do you have to live in Africa? Does he let you have your own thoughts and your own opinions? And do you care about what your kids will end up looking like? All of those kinds of things. Should we want to harm people? Yeah, so that was extended family, people I don't see very often, as well as like people that are just like like not, like they're not like family, but they're like, you grew up with them, that kind of thing. So yeah, that was the hardest part for me. But thankfully my immediate family were just like, yeah, we love David. Also, if you guys break up, we're keeping David. So they were big fans of David once they met him. So yeah.
Similarly, when again, like when I told my parents, they're like, huh, you mean it's a white?
It's a white.
David, take your time.
Yeah, they did say that.
You're studying. I was in school at the time.
You need to get your masters.
Yeah, you need to get your masters. These things, be open. So, so they're just like, don't commit, just take it easy. Like, don't do anything. And
I think
I was happy.
They thought it was like a phase.
Yeah, they thought it was like a phase. But like of course my extended family always are just way more bold, I think, because my aunties and uncles are just like, you don't know Uncle so and so when he dated Muzungu, which is like a white person. Then you see what happened? They divorced and like they just pull out all the worst case
like
scenarios.
Extract analogies.
Yeah, like they always like it's the worst case scenario. Always, and that worst case scenario is gonna happen to you, right? And so they're just giving all these worst case scenarios, and and so I knew my parents were kind of would have a sort of prejudice of like, this American white, like whites, but I was intentional in telling them about Callie very early on, because I wanted them to get to know her so they could replace the reality of who Callie is with the prejudice. Because I didn't blame them for having prejudice, because the reality is that they have
the stories are real.
Those stories are real. Like those stories of Uncle so and so, what happened? The woman, after they got married, she started doing this and all. Like all these things. It's like, it's real what happened. So that's all they have to work with. So I didn't really like blame them for the prejudice that they had. I just wanted them to have a new experience, and know that this is who Callie is. And you can judge Callie based on who she is, not based on the prejudice or the things you've learned from other interracial relationships you've heard of. And so that's why I wanted them to know her as soon as possible, even though they weren't for their idea, because proximity breeds intimacy. Like it breeds, it allows them to really see who she is. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the points, and also being very honest about what did family members say. And it's true. Sometimes extended ones, they bring out all the drama, all the dirt, and it's like, okay, all right. But I love how you guys even introduced the idea of the person. Like, hey, this is who they are as an individual, so that you can work on your biases, your prejudice, that, hey, that's what you're used to. So get to know who I actually love. All right. So now Archie and Siku.
My experience was actually opposite from David and Callie. My brother's like, cool. My cousins were like, cool. And my aunts and uncles, they didn't say anything good or bad. But there was so Siku looks, black don't crack, and she looks like 10 years younger than me. And my aunt took us to lunch, and I think she just wanted to make sure that Siku wasn't using me to get a green card.
No, it wasn't even at lunch.
It wasn't lunch.
No, at lunch she wanted to reassure me that we're a family that accepts black people. Yeah. She gave me like the whole story. She's like, yeah, we Uncle so and so wasn't cool with black people, but he's dead now and we're good. No, what happened was, so the first time I met his family, like I came to California for the wedding.
Yeah.
First time I met his family, his brother picked me up from the airport, and we go to the auntie's house. I get out of the car, and it was like, oh, she's like, this is Siku. One of his aunties comes to me and he's like, oh, so you're Archie's girlfriend? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, do you have a green card? I mean, first question off the bat, I was like, matter of fact, I do. She's like, oh, okay.
So like, it's like race is not the issue. The color of the card is.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, no, I got a green card. But yeah, no, I always felt like super accepted, you know, with his family. My family was worried about whether his family would accept me. Like that was their reaction because, you know, Zimbabwe, we got independence in 1980, so shortly before I was born. So yes, I was born into a free nation, but colonialism is a very recent reality. One, two, there's a new colonialism happening in Africa. That's the Chinese are coming and taking over. And the sad thing is the way that the Chinese treat, this is, I'm not generalizing for all Chinese people are evil, but this is like what's happening, you know, on the continent. The way that they treat Zimbabweans, the way that they treat the Africans is very condescending. It's all the stuff that was blatant racism from white people back in the day is happening with the Chinese, like calling Black people monkeys, you know, they're uncivilized, they have no culture, they're stupid, like all this stuff. And they do it while they're in your country, pilfering your resources. Okay, I'm getting emotional. So this is the reality that my parents are currently living in Zimbabwe. And then he's Chinese, you know, like, you know, like any Asian is Chinese. So they're like, oh, okay, this Chinaman, you know, and his Chinese family, like, are they gonna accept us? And that was really their concern. Like, are they going to, you know, treat us the way that the Chinese treat Zimbabweans? So from the get-go, like it wasn't that they were, it's not like a reverse racism, but it's like a fear of being treated that way. And, you know, I think they, you know, to a certain extent, they still kind of have that, like this, like, okay, let's wait and see. Okay, it's been 7 years, they're married, but let's see, you know, like, but, you know, they were very welcoming and open and that kind of thing. And they were super excited. One thing that really helped was we got married in the States, and then we had a wedding in Zimbabwe 3 months later. And a bunch of his family came, and more had said that they would have come if they had more notice. Mm-hmm. But, you know, his dad was there, you know, cousins came. And I mean, that was huge for my family, you know, just that they were willing to, they're like, they came to Africa, you know, and they're like staying in our homes, you know, and eating our food and just all of that. And they were, you know, there's stuff that we take for granted, you know, because America is a melting pot that, you know, you interact with people from different cultures. But for them, like they didn't feel judged. They didn't feel like they were being looked down upon. And just having that interaction, what was it? Proximity breeds intimacy. Just having that proximity, that they were willing to come out for our wedding and interact with our people. And they treated everybody like they were humans, which obviously they would, but it was like, wow, they accept us, you know? So it was like tables flipped, you know, for my family, I think.
Now I just, based off on what you guys have said, I have a question, starting out with Archie and Siku. Now, have you seen a difference with how your family views things? And it sounds like, I guess your guys' family is being a little bit more open. And also another question is, due to how cultures can think, how do you deal with the insecurities? Like, what if I am making a mistake? What if they actually do want a green card, or the different negative things that the family put in your head? How do you overcome those things?
Well, okay, so how do we overcome the, you know, like, honestly, okay, so for me, like, the questions that people asked, you know, not necessarily even just around culture, just general questions, even like about, this is not going to be, you know, race related, but, you know, we met in Michigan. I had been doing ministry in Michigan for like, what, 7 years at that point, for like 7 years. And, yeah, okay, sorry, the kids, we have kids, and like, they need somebody right now. So sorry. Something happened to our babysitter computer. Okay. But anyways, I was gonna say that, you know, people were familiar in Michigan. People were familiar with me, and you know, they didn't know Archie. Whereas Archie did ministry on the West Coast, and on the West Coast, everybody's like, "Oh, Archie Daco," you know, like he canvas and Bible worked. But anyways, because we met in Michigan, like people had like a question that I got, you know, quite a bit was like who is this guy? Like is he even in ministry? Like does he like even like know the Lord? Like does he is he familiar with like Jewish? I mean, like it was kind of like are you I got a question like, are you settling? Like I was like legit asked, like, are you settling because you know you're a Christian woman and like you know, we know that you love the Lord, you know, like you're trying to do his work and stuff. But are you settling like by marrying this guy? And because they didn't know that, you know, he's like he loves the Lord and his work and he's in ministry as well. Um, so something that I did like with questions that got in my head was just I would think about it and pray about it. And that's the honest truth. Like I was just like, okay, am I settling? You know, and had to wrestle with God and be like, am I settling? Like, you know, with, you know, marrying an Asian man, like, you know, issues like, oh, this might come up or this might come up. And I'll really wrestle with God about it because I made mistakes in my past with relationships. And because I was so sure of myself, I made decisions that were unwise and I didn't listen to counsel. The counsel came gently sometimes and I just brushed it off. But this time I was like, whatever anybody asks me, I'm going to wrestle it with God until I have peace. And if the peace don't come, this is over. Because sometimes God will speak through a donkey to me, you know, and if that donkey is speaking truth, I want to receive that truth. So I guess my experience with questions that, you know, got up in my head was really praying to God and wrestling with him about it until the peace came. And the reason we're married is because the peace came, you know, and I'm thankful that I did that because in our marriage, you know, marriage stuff comes up like in marriage. But because I wrestled with God about it, like with God about every question that people ask me, you know, like, oh, you know, have you thought about, you know, this difference? Have you thought about this challenge? And I would think about it and pray about it. Now, when stuff comes up in our marriage, I have that confidence that I prayed about this thing, you know, like I explored every avenue that the Lord made available to me. And you know, the Lord said, go ahead, you know, so if something new comes up, I'm like, God, if it was supposed to be a deal breaker, you had your chance, you know, and like I was completely open to all the deal breakers, you know, and the Lord, you know, gave us a go ahead. So I guess that would be me. I think, you know, there may be reasons, like legitimate reasons that people bring up and that maybe, you know, racially or culturally connected. I think it's important to be honest with God and to pray and think through them. And then like when you make the decision, when stuff comes up in your marriage and it's like, you know, you have differences based on your race, like he doesn't understand certain aspects of the Black experience in America. Like, I'm like, you know, I wrestled through this and I prayed about this. And here we are, we can work through this because God has already told us to move forward. That's my attempt. Like, it's kind of a rambling attempt at a response.
No, I love that. Do you have anything to say, Archie? Okay, all right. All right, so David and Callie.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking of some examples. So earlier on, I'd been warned when I started dating Callie that white Americans like to, well, they don't like to, but what they do is when their parents grow old, they take them to a nursing home. And that's like the big no-no for, you know, like African homes. It's like when your parents are old, to them that they view it as that you're throwing them away. So like you're supposed to take care of them in the house. And so that was a big worry, is like, you know, are you sure that your parents are just worried whether they'll be taken care of? You know, they know in America, nursing homes are a thing. You know, nursing homes barely exist back in Africa. And so that was like a legit, for me, I was like, okay, this is something I want to consider, because personally, and that's the thing, is that you want to ask yourself, first of all, like, is there anything that scripture recommends in terms of taking care of parents, first of all? Like, is there a moral imperative here? And then also culturally, do you want to adopt that same thing? So something that's a bit smaller is they also would be like, so you mean you want to eat pasta and sandwiches every day? You will no longer eat ugali, you just want pasta and sandwiches in the, are you okay eating pasta for the rest of your life? And in my life, to me, I was like, dude, I love pasta. I love sandwiches. Like, personally, I love that stuff. And so, but the funny thing is that she hates pasta.
I hate pasta.
She actually likes like African food.
Way more.
Which is ironic, right? But just because it's a cultural preference, might not be your cultural preference. Like, you may be okay with eating pasta, like you might be okay with it. But things like the, taking care of parents, like that was important to me. And I wanted to be able to see how Cali viewed that. And, that took time. It took observing.
You can share a conversation if you want.
I forgot the conversation.
Oh, okay, never mind.
But yeah, you can maybe say, but
okay.
I mean, just like observing what she was planning to do to take care of her parents when they were old, observing how she treated her family, how she treated my family when she met them, and just how she valued family and what that meant to her. Not that if you send your parents to a nursing home, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Some parents want that, but just
my mom wants that.
Yeah, just knowing that we were, knowing that we're aligned, and then also involving counselors to talk about some of those issues. What's the conversation we had?
Oh no, I was just.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So things like that. But yeah, just know that eventually you have to form your own culture.
Yeah.
You have to form, like, this is something I want to keep, this is something I don't want to keep. But you can still respect your parents' culture, right? So.
Agreed. Amen.
All right, thanks for sharing. So another question I have is, do you guys feel like racism is dead? We're supposed to be in a better level now in society. And I guess the real question is, have you guys encountered prejudice, racism within the church? And how have you dealt with that? So even especially because of you guys as a couple, have you had people in the church that are pushing back and saying, hey, this is unequally yoked? Okay, can I start with David and Callie?
So racism is definitely a thing, unfortunately. Definitely not dead, unfortunately. I'm trying to think. We've definitely had people treat us some kind of way, but I'm trying to think if it was in the church. I did have somebody in the church when I was dating David, when I think it was actually after we were engaged. She's an older lady in the church. She's done a lot of ministry and I respect her a lot. But she was like, yeah, you should really be careful with David, because those African men, as soon as they get married, they change. And I'm like, based on what? But she's like, I did ministry in East Africa, so like I know. I'm like, oh, it's through the authority on all of men in East Africa. That's cool. All right. So that's kind of the only thing I really encountered inside the church. I feel like because I'm like, I don't know. We just get weird looks sometimes, which just makes me want to hold David's hand more publicly, because I'm like, yeah, look, feel uncomfortable. That's how I handle those kinds of things.
Yeah.
What do you think?
You mean like when people thought you're taking the black man from them? All the African ladies who
but
think
that's
you're
not,
taking the black.
yeah, because I'm trying to keep in the scope of her question of like,
yeah,
like in the church. But yeah,
I mean, you can say something about that too. You can add that in.
Okay. I would say the only time I've been treated like unkindly was when I was in Kenya, and there were women our age who, as soon as they found out I was with David, they just changed the way they treated me. And our cousins were like, yeah, because you took him from them. And I was like,
I didn't have a choice. I was kidnapped.
And I was
didn't have a choice in the matter.
I'm like, what? Like, I'm sorry. So that was, yeah, there'd just be people who would be like talking to me really, really nice. And as soon as they know I'm with them, they're just like super not nice. So that's it. That's all I had. It mostly, I mean, maybe it should hurt my feelings, but it mostly confused me because I'm like, the same thing as David. I'm like, I didn't kidnap him. Like, what? I didn't force him. Like, what? But yeah, I mean, people deal with their emotions in different ways. So, yeah. Do you have anything to contribute? I feel like I don't have a good answer to this question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it.
Okay. All right. Now, Siku and Archie.
I think we've been really fortunate not to have encountered any blatant, I think also people kind of don't know what to do about like a Black and Asian thing. It's kind of, like the Black white thing, there's some set feelings about it, but I feel like Black and Asian is kind of like, I guess they kind of both minorities. Yeah. So we haven't.
I mean, there was that one time at church, Siku was talking to the African ladies, like, oh yeah, we'll have you over.
Oh, they've been saying they're gonna have me over
for lunch, and Siku was pointing to like, oh, my husband's over there because she's newly married, and I was standing tall to my friend Michael, who's like a 6 foot tall Black man, and she's like, Archie, come here, and then I turn. And I start walking, and they all go, ooh.
and they never had us over.
They never had us over.
Well, thanks for sharing those things. But I do have another question, because I guess it's just thinking about like, how do you deal with the struggle of living in a society where sometimes they do give looks? Like, how do you not try to, or you encounter situations like the Moses and Zipporah, like even family members are against. So in that way, and maybe even some people may feel like, oh, you're stealing someone from our culture, our race, whatever it is. So I know Callie was or Dave was gonna mention something about that. So we'll go there.
I'll start it. I think, part of it is the same answer when people ask me, like, how do you know you want to be in a long distance relationship? Because we were in a long distance, and which is in a lot of ways more difficult than an in-person relationship. And my answer for the both is the same: is if the person's worth it, then they're worth it. And that's kind of it. So I think both of you need to count the cost and realize what you're in for. I think in some ways, there are some things that are more difficult for me, and there are some things that are more difficult for David. And we both have to have informed consent about that. So we can't just be like, oh, we'll get married and everything will be fine, and no one will ever ask me if my children belong to me. Like, I know that's coming. I totally know, no matter what my children look like, they're going to be like, oh, where did you get them? Like, from my body. Please leave me alone. Like, just, I already know. And so, like, knowing that kind of stuff is coming. And for the things that I can control, like I can't control strangers, right? I'm not going to hold a like racism 101 seminar in the grocery store. But when I have friends or family members or people that I know are open, then I do try to educate. I try to rein in my reactive anger and be like, yeah, you're speaking out of ignorance. Let me help you learn some things. And it's, it's not my responsibility to completely change their worldview. But I think we can help educate in that way. So something I try to do, also just speaking up against, like I know there's actually, since David came into our family, and my younger brother, his fiance is half Japanese. And like, since David and her have joined our family, like there's a lot less racist jokes in our family. So I praise God for that. I'm like, yeah, because people now. And so like kind of helping that, and David and her are also really good about just being like, yeah, we're just here to, we're here, and they don't take offense, which is generous of them. But yeah, I think partially, I'm just rambling now, but I'll try to summarize what I'm saying. So partially I ignore it. Partially I'm just like, whatever, like your life must suck to view the world this way. I feel sorry for you. Also, you make me angry. Part of it's that. Another part is if I have a relationship with somebody and I can actually help educate them or help clarify something or just push back and be like, oh yeah, David's that way probably because he's Kenyan, right? And I'll be like, nope, that's not why. That's it.
Mhm.
And just make them feel uncomfortable for the uncomfortable thing they said. Yeah, that's something I do. So do you have anything
Yeah.
to contribute, Henny?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I just think like again, like the interesting thing about Cali and I is that as different cultural backgrounds that as we come from, you know, the one thing that really connected us, of course, is our faith and a common Adventist heritage, and that that is how the Adventist, the value of our faith comes to light. That people are wondering how this exists, or like, why are you guys together? Like, what's going on? Like, our faith is the common thing that really sticks us together, and it's also what allows us to see kind of past those things, right? And so I think that's what really comes to haystacks. There's no haystacks in Kenya. So people don't know about haystacks. So but yeah, so I think that, and I forgot what I was gonna say.
Can we tell a story while you think of it?
Yeah, you can tell a story.
I was gonna say just a quick story of right when I knew that I liked David. I was pretty sure he liked me. Before we had talked about it, somebody I know was like, well, you know, maybe just like try to meet this guy. Like, there's just this guy I want you to meet up with. And in my head, I'm like, I bet they're white. So, and he was. So I met him at church, and we grew up. We weren't like friends, but you know, it's my friends knew his friends knew him. So like we're all in the same group. I grew up within like 30 miles of him, and we're the same age, very similar background. I talked to this guy for 30 seconds, and I was like, absolutely never, ever. No, hard no. So, but it's like, but if people would look at us, they'd be like, why not? Like, you have so much in common. It's crazy. First, like you and David, like you grew up on a different continent. Like, what in the world? But like, that's our core values and the core things that we value. I just said the same thing twice.
Yeah.
Anyways, core values that are core. The things that were most important to us were the same, and they transcended our upbringing, they transcend the color of our skin, they transcend our geography, they transcend all those things. And so even though this person and I look so similarly, there's no way I would ever enjoy a romantic relationship with that person. Versus Dave and I, people look at us, they're like, how in the world? Like, I'm light, he's dark. Like, what? Like, we are as far, we're as far the side of the spectrum as it can be. But yet, like, David is my person, and like David feels like home to me. And I think that comes from God himself. So, yeah.
I do have a question, because, you know, especially at the beginning of COVID, that's when there was a lot of more racial tension. And especially with the Black Lives Matter and the police brutality, how did that affect your relationship, Callie and David? Did you ever have this fear of like, could something happen to him? Did that cause any tension?
This is our conference before our answer.
I forgot what you said.
Okay. Give me an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In general, like philosophy of life in general, I have more fear than David does. I'm just more prone to fear and anxiety about racism, but like about literally anything. David's more just like, it is what it is. Like, it's fine. So yeah, I think I don't necessarily even know if it's like, oh yeah, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was more worried. We were also in Kenya, which there is definitely, I noticed, so here in the US, I notice more that David is treated badly versus in Kenya, I notice more that I'm treated really, really well. If that makes sense. Like, that's what sticks out to me in both places. So we were in Kenya at the time. So I'm like, I'm not really worried for David's safety, honestly. In Kenya, I'm not as much. But here, yeah, like even to this day, like I'm like, David, I can speed, you cannot speed. Because if we get pulled over and you're driving, worse things will happen. And that's like, I'll take illegal U-turns. David will not take illegal U-turns. Like just very basic living your life stuff. But I'm like, yeah, like, but I'm like, if somebody pulls me over, I know I'll be fine. Like, I'll just be like, oh, officer, my bad. I wasn't paying attention. Like, that's a me thing. So like, sorry about that. Versus like, I mean, David's also just more careful than me in general, but yeah, just like little things like, no, we need to make sure if you're the person doing it, it needs to be like the letter of the law, because I don't trust what will happen. I don't trust people to treat you the way that you deserve to be treated. I don't trust people to give you the respect that you deserve. I don't trust them. And so that makes me scared. A lot of times, especially like even other stuff. Like David went out grocery shopping with my mom a few months ago. And my mom came back. She was like, people are racist. I'm like, yeah, we know. She's like, it's so weird. Like they're just like walking and like, cause she goes to the same grocery stores like every single Friday. And she's like, people won't even look at me because I'm with David. And like if David goes somewhere else, but then he comes back, like they treat me differently. I'm like, yeah, I know, it's the worst. And she's like, he's even dressed nice. Like, what are they upset about? I'm like, yeah, I know. Like even like when we go flying, I am dressed in like the most relaxing pajama-like clothes ever. David dresses like he's going to a business meeting. And I'll be like, babe, wear like more relaxing clothes. And he's like, people are nicer to me if I dress this way. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. So like, I don't think, before I was in a relationship with David, I don't think I ever like denied racism or thought it was, imaginary or anything, but I definitely never had been so close to it and seen it. And yeah, it is very upsetting. And it does make me fear for David. It makes me fear that like, you don't know that David's one of the nicest people to ever walk this earth. Like you don't know that because you're operating on stereotypes that somebody else put in your brain. And it makes me angry that a lot of times there's nothing I can like do about that person thinking that. It's like, but could you just talk to him? And they're like, no, like I don't like people who look like him. And I'm like, well, I have unChrist-like thoughts towards you, but all right.
I just wanted to say, like, on the thing of how the BLM stuff, beginning of pandemic, like, it made us talk a lot. Like, this is one of our products, as you can see, and I think our kids like kind of look a little bit confusing. Maybe sometimes you're like Hispanic, Dominicano, like you're kind of like, I'm not sure what to do with this face, but like Kelly talked about fear. Like, I don't think it's like a fear. Maybe it's because fear has become so normalized, but for me, like having lived in America for a while, like for 2 decades, seeing the police evokes a certain emotional response that it doesn't for Archie, and there's certain things like in terms of how we want to raise our kids that I'm like, our kids cannot play with this. They cannot play like this. These games are not acceptable for our children. And he's like, why? And I'm like, because our children, like they can't do certain things, we are constant argument in our home is the children's hair. I'm like, they cannot go out looking all raggedy like that. And he's like, it's so cool. Their hair is so beautiful. And I'm like, no, their hair is a mess, and he like does not get it. Like, he's just like, I love their curls. I mean, and I just love, like, it's just so free. And I'm like, no, it needs to be tamed. All right. Like we need to bring some, okay. So I think like it brought up a lot of conversation, I guess, between us about, more so for like raising boys in America, who are not distinctively, I think Asians get a pass, like a bunch of stuff, but I'm like, our children are not gonna have the same experience that he had, growing up. And even though I'm not a Black male, like as a Black female, I think I have more proximity to the kind of experience that they're going to have, and I'll be better equipped to prepare them for the America that they're going to grow up in if time should persist, So that's something that we didn't think about when we were dating and talking about having children. We definitely thought, Jesus is coming soon, the world is so sinful, and that falls within the purview of that. But I guess practically speaking, growing up as a Black boy in America, it's kind of, I kind of always thought that having boys, the father will have to train them. But in terms of being a Black boy in America, I'm like, I think I need to, like there are things that I'm like, I need to step in and help. you know.
it is scary to like think like, man, my son can get shot at by the police because he's a big black man, and not even a man. He could be 14 and look like a big black man
because he's wearing a hoodie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, our children can never wear a hoodie. So in our house they have hoodies, but I'm like, you never wear the you never put the hood on. And he's like, why? I'm like, no, you don't understand. They need to be trained never to put the hood on. It's like,
and it's scary and frightening to actually like wrestle like with that fact, like they could get killed just because they're black. And that's something I could never understand, but I can empathize because my kids are black. And I don't want anything. I'm just like any black parent. I don't want anything to happen to them. Because I love you.
Thank you guys so much for just being honest. And it's very disheartening to hear, this is the reality of, how many people can treat individuals based on their skin color. So I know we're about to be ending soon. So I guess the question is, how can we learn to just love each other and see past the differences, and also like love those that may not love us? So that's just a question I could ask. And also, what are some misbeliefs that we can learn from interracial couples? I'll start with, were you about to go, Siku? Gonna say something? Okay, no, I saw you going to unmute, so. Okay.
We can start.
Okay, you go.
Okay.
David.
Yeah, I want to see if you guys see this picture here. You guys see it? So this happened in August 2019, where my family flew all the way from Kenya, and we had a lot of relatives who live here as well. And it was the first time that our families were meeting after we got engaged. And it was like the most beautiful interaction, right? Like it was so, it was just a wonderful time where these two different cultures came together. Especially, knowing that they're Adventists, but grew up in very different places and ways of life, yet still Adventist. And it was just amazing for them to come together in that way. And yeah, if you are in an interracial relationship, just take courage that there is a beauty that God reveals through your relationship. Even though it's difficult, there's a beauty that God is revealing through it, and through the love that you share. So that's my encouragement. Like that picture gives me hope, and it was just such a beautiful after the years of like all the comments and thoughts and like scared that your parents wouldn't accept your partner and like all these things. And sometimes, unfortunately, some people that never happens, like their families never want to interact, but there's a witness and a beauty in sharing the love that you have, and God uses that to speak to people. Yeah.
Amen. Thanks for sharing that in the photo. Loved it. All right. And then I will just ask Siku and Archie. You can answer the question.
No, you can.
I think that heaven is going to be so wonderful because all that God had intended for us to experience with one another will finally get to. And I wish, not just wish, but it's one of the goals for me, to do whatever I can to help our church, the Adventist church, to begin to experience that here. We have such a richness. I mean, what is it? The Adventist church is the most diverse church in North America, but you don't necessarily see that diversity, you know, in every church that you go into, because we segregate ourselves. And it would be so beautiful to start having a taste of heaven while we're here, to learn from each other, to experience the joy of the differences that we have. So that's a prayer I have, a goal. My prayer is that our relationship, like I said, I think the Black Asian mix is kind of like, people are like, I'm not sure what to do with that, and it's interracial, but I'm praying, like my prayer is that God can use this like weirdness to help people feel a little more comfortable with difference, you know? Yeah.
Blasian.
Yeah, like the Blasian weirdness, you know, to help people feel a little more comfortable with difference and interacting with difference, so that we can begin the healing experience here, because the world needs to see that. Like, the world is longing for that. So that's...
Amen. Amen. And I know we went over a little bit over time. There's more questions. I'll ask one last question real quick. If I could just ask Siku and Archie, how do you handle conflict, especially when there's a language barrier and you misunderstand your partner?
So like between each other, conflict, like, yeah.
Correct.
I think first thing, you know, the principles of what the Bible teaches, like all of that stuff. Like, so love, like you have to assume the best of the other person, like first place, you know, because even without language barrier, this happens. But like, language barrier makes it harder. I feel like the stuff, the challenges that we've experienced as an intercultural, interracial couple are probably the kind of things that you'd experience anyway, but it's just like an extra layer added on top. But I think that extra layer just makes a greater opportunity for, like, you know, really overcoming, you know, in that area, even an opportunity for greater clarity, maybe I would say. So like, assuming the best of each other, like assuming that what he said, he didn't mean it that way. It's because he's American or like whatever. I don't understand why, but for some reason, I'm not understanding his heart, you know? So like, I just assume from the beginning that he loves me and I love him. So we're gonna work this out. 1, 2, we are on the same team. Like, I'm not here, he doesn't win or I win, we need to win together, you know? So the only way that this works is if at the end of this, we have worked it out as a team, you know? So like, and then like with that as a foundation, then we go into a conversation about, okay, so what you said hurt me, or what I understood, or how I felt, you know? So then with that as a premise, it changes the way that you're addressing the issue, addressing the misunderstanding. But I think firstly, assuming the best of the other person, you know, starting with that, like, I feel hurt right now and I feel like he doesn't love me, but I know he loves me. So I'm gonna start with, he loves me, right? And then the only way we're gonna come out of this is we come out of it like stronger together. And then we start the conversation.
Thank you so much. You guys shared so much information that I love your realness and raw, and even talking about, well, I didn't like when my relative said this, and maybe sometimes I want to fight, but Jesus, you know, whatever it may be. So, and also just sharing, like, there could be some fears that, of course, society can bring on if you're watching TV and such, but at the end, it's just knowing that God has brought you guys together, and God will bring you through the tough times, the good times, and what a beautiful representation of how heaven will be. So many different cultures and races in one spot. And that's the thing, is God loves each one of us, our differences and the similarities, and God has made us all unique. So thank you so much. We didn't get to go through all the questions, but I loved hearing everything. And so that's the end of it for this panel discussion. There'll be another one, part 2, and we'll have another couple coming, and then David and Callie will be back again with us. So thank you so much for coming, and enjoy the rest of your evening.